about his.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. You were live.
Yeah. So, hi, welcome to Hyperledger Climate Action SIG group. Here we are working with companies or startups or the projects who are building on climate, ESG, and carbon credit. And we have a couple of different working groups. So one is carbon accounting and certification working group, which even we have code base and part of the Hyperledger labs. We also have standard working group defining the standards around the climate action tech, especially in Hyperledger perspective. And we have research and engagement working group where we are focusing on new research methodologies for the carbon counting and kind of those steps. And we actively participate in different event. Like last year, we were winner of the IBM Code program, and along with me, Sherwood Murray is another co-chair for this SIG. And today we have a guest speaker talking about net zero and carbon credit tokenization. And Subbu Jois is a co-founder of a company called Oricraft. They are the DLT designed for real world asset tokenization, and there are use cases where this carbon credit tokenization can be built on Oricraft efficiently. So here is Subbu is going to talk about how he think about the market and how the technology is beneficial for carbon credit and especially climate tech topic. Yes, Subbu, over to you and this is your.
Thanks for that, Kamlesh. Thanks for the invite, and it's great talking to such an august audience. Briefly about me, been in the tech industry startup for the last 34 years, building products and platforms. For the last 8.5 years, I've been building Origraph, which is a miningless DLT protocol and a platform by which we've been able to provide hyperscalability with ultra low latencies. Like we've been able to bring up more than 100,000 transactions per second with sub-second latency. Among the things that we have been focusing on, or actually right now, the primary focus has been real-world asset tokenization, because we've also done a lot of integration with open data and open banking to provide real-world solutions. One of the forays that we have been working on is the carbon credits marketplaces. Before I get there, I'll just give you a brief about why this is important today and what is the need for it. I'm sure almost all of you must have heard of net zero, where currently all the major countries in the world, including the US, China, India, and all the European Union, are focusing on reducing carbon emissions worldwide in order to prevent the global temperature rise going beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius from 1970 as a base. Unfortunately, it's not been going well, and I am at least skeptical that we will be able to achieve that goal of net zero by 2030. That's the target timeline. As per some scientists, we've already gone past that point. Some are saying we are very close, and maybe we have a year or two to prevent that. But yeah, it is tough. If you go by the numbers, it looks very tough that we will achieve net zero by 2030. However, the challenges if we don't achieve net zero by 2030 is huge. They're expecting the seas to rise by between 1 to 3 meters in different places, which means that many of the coastal areas will be flooded. Many of the coastal cities, namely New York, Mumbai, Chennai, Singapore, Jakarta, places like Sydney would get flooded, may actually go underwater. Smaller countries like Maldives would definitely sink. They are just about 1.5 meters above sea level. Now, given that is one threat, but that would also mean that approximately 1.2 billion people will be displaced, which can be a severe climate disaster. And a larger part of it is also that in such an event, with the temperature rise, the agricultural scientists have predicted that the agricultural outputs may drop by 15 to 20% in terms of productivity. In my own case, I've been seeing this for the last about 15, 20 years. I have a small pomegranate tree in my backyard, and I've been seeing the size of the fruit shrinking by more than now 40, 50%, where I would need, like, I could hold one big fruit in a hand. Now I can hold actually 2 to 3 small, fruits, because they're not actually getting the size that they were originally getting. The same would happen where, as per scientists, the average yield from most of the crops, be it paddy, that's rice or wheat or many of the vegetables, would suffer from uh, uh, reduced growth, and which could have a much larger disaster in terms of food safety for the world over. So I'm just telling you two instances. Why, if you go on, I mean, some of the scientists actually give a pretty apocalyptic scenario going forward, maybe in 20 years, 30 years, and beyond. We'll just stay here on these 2 points. Yes, the scene going forward is not very, I would say, encouraging, at least from a climate perspective. Having said that, what are the remedies that we can look at? At this point of time, there's a lot of research which has been happening on direct air capture, that is capturing carbon dioxide directly from the air to reduce the carbon emissions in the air. There are also other techniques that are being sort of proposed, which is science-based techniques or inventions that can reduce carbon emissions, but to reduce the on one side. The other side has been to prevent carbon emissions by changing the source of the emission. Namely, one, of course, has been trying to move to alternative energy sources away from oil or coal. Also, looking at electrically powered devices or vehicles, which you're quite familiar with. However, in the recent past, lithium-ion batteries are themselves considered to be not very environment friendly, as some of you might have heard of that, right? So there's a lot of conundrum happening in that direction about how do we reduce emissions and how do we keep the global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius as much as we can. Today I was just reading that, because of the oceans warming up, quite a large percentage of the corals have already bleached in the sense they have died and they've turned white. The Great Barrier Reef is off the coast of Australia which is possibly the largest coral reef in the world, has been known to be dying for the last couple of decades. The same is being observed a lot of other places. Yeah, so we would possibly see even the seas being severely affected, including the growth of fish and other sea life being impacted by this. The most, I would say, the most efficient way to reduce carbon emissions or to remove that from the environment still remains what we call agroforestry or nature-based control, which is to grow essentially more trees, promote more green vegetation, which in effect becomes the most efficient way of converting carbon dioxide into oxygen. That still remains, I would say, the cheapest way to do it, where in many cases the cost is under between $4 to $6 per metric ton of carbon emissions being absorbed by vegetation and converted back to oxygen. Techniques like DAC, that is direct air conversion, the cost goes up to as much as $60 to $100 per metric ton of carbon emissions. So we still believe that the nature-based technique, which is growing more trees, increasing the vegetation, would possibly be the most efficient way of doing it, and would be the also the cheapest way, and nature takes care of itself. Given these scenarios, what are the options? The options are the biggest emitters of carbon emission at this point of time happen to be uh, thermal power stations, steel mills, cement mills, cement factories, and then of course airline and automobiles. It is in that direction that many folks have been trying to reduce the carbon emissions, which you might have noticed, especially automobile manufacturers in Europe and US have to now have to declare what is the carbon emission per kilometer or per mile for a given vehicle. And in due course of time, we will have rules and regulations in place. In California, it is already in place. In I think Germany and other parts of Europe, it's already in place where you have to offset your carbon emissions. It started for vehicles, and now I guess in California, last year it was. We also have you to offset your emissions for other energy consumptions at your home. Like for example, if you're using other devices which cause emissions, you're expected to buy carbon offsets. Those of you living in California will have a more detailed more details on that. Given that as a scenario, carbon emissions offset is a big opportunity and a big market at this point in time. What is being done in this case is agencies and enterprises are using satellite imagery to capture green covers in designated like projects, as they call it, where like in Brazil or in South America, there are a lot of projects happening. In Southeast Asia, quite a few projects have started off where you capture the green cover of a piece of land, and then compute the carbon pools in that particular piece of land from which you sequester carbon storage, and therefore convert that into carbon credits. So a carbon credit in this case is considered one metric ton of CO2 emissions which has been either emitted or absorbed back. And now, based on the given guidelines that we have at this point of time for forest-based or nature-based carbon emissions removal, carbon dioxide removal, it's about folks can earn between 0.5 to 4.5 carbon credits per acre. Typically, the average is about around 2 carbon credits per acre based on the species of the trees going there and the coverage of the land that is covered by the trees. So there are different norms in this case about what should be the size of the tree, what should be the girth of the tree, what is the vegetation that's growing there. In some cases, agricultural growth is also considered for carbon credits. Like we have in Southeast Asia, some projects where they're considering rice fields. In other cases, we are having agroforestry where there is a mix of agriculture and forests, which are being considered for this to help in increasing the yield. And then there are community initiatives that are further initiated where, for example, if you can help conserve the local wildlife or local communities living in the forest, especially in tribal areas, and help them to or facilitate them to sort of increase their livelihood and conserve the forest with the tribals over there. It gains additional points in this in the endeavor to reduce emissions. So the nature-based approach has been in many cases sustainable and is likely to be possibly our I would say in this case the holy grail for reducing carbon emissions worldwide. Some of you might have also read about, we're losing an acre a minute in the Amazonian forests. So there have been attempts to arrest that as much as we can, and therefore revive Amazonian forests to become one of the biggest carbon sinks on the face of Earth. Amazonian forests have been considered since time immemorial the biggest carbon sink in balancing the carbon emissions worldwide. But in the last, I would say, 50 to 70 years, cutting down Amazonian forests have resulted in significant loss of tree cover, and therefore uh, climate change has been impacted. Now, given these scenarios, what is it that we can do as a technology in the technology space to ensure that carbon credits can grow faster? The bane of the carbon credit industry today has been, should we say, the lack of traceability about from where we are being able to sequester the carbon credit. For example, there was a scandal recently in Zimbabwe near a lake called Kariba. What actually happened was a Swiss company sort of tied up with a Zimbabwean businessman who promised them to grow forests around the lake, and then claimed that they have been able to grow vegetation. Now, the story goes that that this gentleman managed to doctor satellite images of the area around the lake and provide and show green cover to have increased around the lake, and then sold that data to a Swiss company called South Pole, who in turn sold the carbon credits so sequestered to Delta Airlines. Those of you in the US might be aware that Delta charges a carbon surcharge per seat per mile, right? So the reason and what they do is they essentially buy offsets to reduce the carbon emissions by airlines. Logistics is another big space where carbon emissions are in question. So Delta bought $200 million worth of carbon credits from South Pole, which was in turn sourced from Zimbabwe. Now, late in 22, early 23, the scandal broke that someone went and took photographs of the area designated, or like the Zimbabwean businessman, so to say, claimed that it was getting greener and stuff like that. Much to their shock, they found it was all just barren land, nothing was growing, and he had also made claims that he had helped in the community development by sort of teaching them beekeeping, and so therefore they were like growing honey and so on and so forth. Now, this is a problem that I think technologies like blockchain can solve, where if you are able to tag the source of the carbon credit and from where we are sourcing it, and putting it on a blockchain or a DLT, we should be able to give traceability and transparency to not just the verifier but also the buyers of carbon credits. In this case, for example, Delta, right? Now, this is one business problem that could be definitely moved to technology like Hyperledger or Origraph or whichever DLT you want to propose to gain to demonstrate transparency and traceability. The impact of this scandal was carbon credits, which were trading at like $27, $28, crashed to about under $3. It was a 90% wipe off. Unfortunately, we may see some more such scandals in the coming years because many of these projects have been long running. Many of the agreements that are signed are for like minimum of 40 years. And with 2030 as a net zero goal for all the developed world and 2050 as the goal for developing world. And besides that, China has taken a date of 2060 and India has taken a date of target date of 2070. However, we may not still achieve the targets of net zero even beyond 2070 is what most scientists feel, given the way things have been going. And we continue to see the effects of climate change and global warming world over. In this case, for us as a DLT industry or blockchain space, this is one space that we can possibly make an impact by providing traceability and transparency right from source to buyer, by using whatever techniques are best used. I'm good then. So with those words, I'd like to say that yeah, I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Subbu. So I think how do you see the different? I think this opportunity across the globe similar way, or specific geographies are maybe behaving differently.
So at this point of time, carbon credits from Europe are considered the most authenticated and verified. Even in the US, there have been cases of many of the Indian reserves, Indian nations as they are called, have got some carbon credit projects going, which are not considered that very, should we say, verified or genuine. There have been some cases of just grassland being marked as places for where they've been sequestering carbon credits. So it all depends on how well you verify the sequestration of carbon pools, where blockchain or DLT can play a role.
Okay. Anybody have any question? Yeah, I think we don't have any question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Kamlesh has got my coordinates. Anyone wishes to get in touch, I'll be happy to help.
Or maybe you can share your at least your email ID or your maybe LinkedIn profile, so people who would like to check.
Sure. I'll just paste it in the. I'll paste it in the chat.
Yeah. And this YouTube live streaming is on Hyperledger YouTube. You can have a look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I'll just share my LinkedIn profile also. Happy to be of assistance. Happy to work with you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think next week we have very interesting sessions from one company. They are doing tokenization agri-tech, and they are using the Hyperledger fabric. So looking forward to join the next call. Meanwhile, any discussion you would like to have, I think we can discuss. We have time.
Well, maybe I can try to ask a question. It's not completely related to the presentation, but my name is Claudio. I work with Capgemini Engineering, and we are starting a project where we are interested in automate the process of generating certificates and token for carbon accounting. We noticed that there is a project on a Hyperledger that is responsible for that, and that project has a design that specifies 3 actors, and one of those actors, sorry, is the provider, the auditor of the process. And the question I have for you is, do you think that if we had enough IoT knowledge, we could create an actor that could automatize that process instead of having an auditor the IoT process would be responsible to generate that information and create distribute the tokens accordingly in the blockchain.
Okay, so we're talking about this project, right? Which is our Hyperledger Labs, right? This carbon accounting one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think here, because when we go to the carbon credit, generally this Vira or gold standard is a standard body, and there is some auditor term is there. So that's why we added this auditor as one of the stakeholder. But I think technically, if you see this different aspect of this project, now you see the DAO. There is another DAO where we don't have any such kind of terminology, where community can decide via the voting about the authenticity of any carbon footprint or carbon credit saving. So obviously IoT can play a role if because if you capture the data as real time with verification, then we don't need any auditor at all.
Okay. So it's totally feasible that we replace the auditor with an IoT device.
Yeah, correct. Because proof is to have a authenticity of data, right? How you bring the authenticity, right? If you can on chain can define the authenticity of what is the manner, whether you are maybe reading data via sensor or IoT, or maybe you bringing the trusted system, let's say for example DAO kind of system in ecosystem, then you can bring the trust because using a blockchain is that's the concept, like how you can bringing the trust in the accounting and the carbon credit process. And if he still an auditor, then it's a similar traditional system and recording the data on blockchain only.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So,
Can I add to that?
If you see the journey of this one now, you can find out how we did it. Yes, Subbu, you can edit.
Yeah. So there is one issue in this case, and that is the current practices. In the sense, the current verification processes are still, I would say, remote sensing and IoT devices and things like that have not yet been incorporated. The new practices were published only in January of this year. So we are still in early days, and it may take some time before the methodologies. What you need to do is first get the methodology approved by a verifying agency, and after that you can implement it.
Understood. Yeah. Thank you.
I think Nimesh want to talk. Hi, Nimesh.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So my doubt was like, now there are these registries, right, who verify the carbon methodology and issue carbon credit. Right now, how you guys tokenize? I didn't understand that part, right? Now, Rera verifies the process or methodology and says that yeah, it reduces the emission, and they issue a carbon credit. Now, how you guys come into in the place and say that I will tokenize the carbon credit?
Okay.
Correct.
So yeah. So I can address them maybe on my head.
Go ahead.
There are two generally process in the carbon credit. One is accounting, right? Measuring the footprint and saving, where we need blockchain to account all the credit worthy data. What generally Vera and Gold Standard do, either their auditing and the different process, right? And second term is tokenizing, means kind of digital representatives of this token, because currently in Vera and Gold Standard, this is available as a maybe one complete certificate. And second, it is costly. I think when you want to have the project audited, you need to pay something around 20% fee, and still the market liquidity is not available, right? But using tokenization, you can bring this liquidity to even $1. I think that is, and there are a couple of companies startup already doing. They are taking the data from this registries and just representing in token form and then placing in a secondary market where people can buy.
I think they're doing it in Matic Polygon blockchain.
Whether they're doing Matic or what are the blockchain, but there are many companies doing who just representing this certificate in a token, which maybe liquidity is a one thing, and other opening the market for the buyer even who can't afford the buyer buying from this golden investor kind of platforms.
Okay. So right now we are just representing that certificate as a token and issuing it.
Yeah, correct. So I said now there are two things. One is directly if you have a certificate data available, tokenize it, or maybe couple of project like what in the Hyperledger we created this open source code where we
Okay.
created both the component. First component to record all this information via different forms in all the methods, and then using this data input as a carbon footprint saving and calculating carbon credit and tokenizing in another blockchain. If you see the architecture of this application,
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
two components. One is the emission data channel, which is a
Hmm.
Hyperledger fabric based network to record all the information what you need for the carbon credit footprint saving kind of thing, and then another network to tokenize it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
some people who already believe or want to use the only existing Vara gold standard, they directly can use this simply tokenizing it.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
are
Yeah, I
a
think
few points. There are a few points that you need to also consider under this. Is that as from the date of tokenization, as time progresses, with aging, the value of the token will keep dropping because it's about the past. So second aspect is to prevent duplication of the token from that particular geography. About say if you've generated the token sequestered carbon pools from say a particular forest, that needs to be only sold to one party and redeemed by that party to offset their emissions. So we need a global registry for this. Currently, all the verifying agencies submit this with the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, uh, and um, and therefore UNFCCC takes care of the deduplication to ensure that from the time of registration of our carbon credit to the point of redemption of the carbon credit to register the offset, the entire process has to be is transparent and clear, and they will not permit any duplication in such cases.
I got
Did
it.
that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
So if
Any
there
more?
are, yeah, if there are no more questions, shall I drop, Kamlesh? You guys can
Yeah, I
continue.
think
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll be happy to take any questions in future. Have a good
okay.
day.
Yeah, good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think if because there are if you are interested, we have a couple of working groups, and I think if anyone want to have get interest to be get involved, or maybe want to propose a new working group, I think happy to discuss as a climate uh, uh, control. I think climate action group. If you have something which is not covered on you want to see in a regular meetings or want to propose something, then I think we're happy to have call because we have a standard working group. And I think maybe if this is not something in meetings happen regularly, we can develop it. And also, I think this particular lab is already done and all the component available in a Hyperledger lab. But if still someone want to maintain it, I think come forward. You can get involved and be maintainer for this one. And there are research working group, or if you see, if you want to create another industry-wise, vertical-wise group, let's say ESG or renewable energy or EV kind of thing, then I think there is also we can think about it. So let us know, let us David, me, or Server to introduce something new if you uh, want to do here. Okay, yeah. So thank you. I think David, I think we can stop the recording, and then when if there's no question, I think we can wrap up too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.